Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the 1977-78 Topps basketball set through the 1981-82 set. So 5 years, 77 through 81. And this marks the fourth video in exploring the early modern basketball cards. And for early modern basketball cards, there's a very clear cutoff date because Topps stopped making cards for basketball after the 81-82 set, and we didn't see a set emerge until 86-87 with Fleer. But even then, that's really kind of a borderline modern card. But very clearly, that gap between the two eras is an easy way to operate. And so this exploration, this really does bring an exclamation point to the early phases of cards for basketball fans, because there just weren't very many basketball fans out there buying cards. And I give Topps credit. They put 13 sets out there through the 1970s. They tried, but they couldn't quite make it work. So this brings to a close this whole early phase of trying to make basketball cards work. And we do have some very interesting set designs and ideas that Topps threw out there through this time period, just trying to get it to somehow work. And watching the evolution of the cards through this time is personally something that I'm really fascinated by. And so this final stage is both when they hit a second rhythm, and then when they tried a couple of really unique things to try to invigorate a card base or a fan base that never was very, very big. So what Topps had been doing in this period, starting in 1969, was they started off with tall boys in order to make cards that would really jump out, that would really stand out. And then they got into the rhythm of making a standard card set for basketball. It did all the things you would expect. It had all-stars, it had team leaders, it had league leaders, it had playoff cards, all sorts of stuff. Bunch of different subsets, both leagues, the NBA and the ABA. And by 1976, that just wasn't working, and so they scaled it back for the 76 set, made a simplified card set, and they made them ridiculously big. Unfortunately, that didn't work either. So by the time they got to the 77 card set, which is where we're beginning here, they needed to really kind of retool the card set and just try not to do too much. So the card set by 1977 was only 132 cards. Don't try to get people to get a really big set. Make sure that it's focused down, and don't gum it up with a bunch of subsets. Just get to the players. That was their model. And these cards were all standard size cards, which is notable when you consider the sets that had come before this. But these are all normal size cards for every one of these 5 sets. But the way that they approached the cards, there were some variations. So in the 1977 set, the card is just a straightforward standard card. Down at the bottom, they have a slightly rising text for the team name, kind of a nod to the 1971 design. And a floating basketball with the position on it so that you know what sport it is. And that's basically all that they did for these cards. Not a lot. They just wanted to let the card be just a normal card, but again, in a smaller set. And again, they did not do any subsets because they were at the point where subsets, there was no point. So any player who was on the All-Star game, or in the All-Star game, they have a tag that is encircling the position basketball. That is what denotes the All-Star players. So there's not a separate card, it's just that the players who were All-Stars, it's flagged on their card. And then one really interesting thing about these cards is that in the manufacturing process, there are 2 different card stocks that these cards were made with. One of the card stocks has a very white finish to it, and the other has a very gray finish to it. It's not a bold difference between the two, it's pretty subtle, but you can collect the cards in either way. The white is usually what people try to go for, but it's almost like a parallel. It's kind of a pushy parallel, but they did have this feature that was inadvertently a part of this card set. And that's 1977-78. So in the next year, 1978, they took a cue from what Topps had created in football. They did it kind of the same way in basketball, where on the side they have all the text running vertically up the card. This means that the space for the image is now shrunk a little bit. And so it fits better with the proportions of how action shots in basketball work. So it does do a good job of kind of focusing you more in on the player. But the thing about this card that's really notable is the fact that for this card, they have a portrait down at the bottom. And this was really significant because nobody was doing portraits on the back of cards. We wouldn't see that done with quality until 1988 with Score. There had been a couple of cards before then, Fleer and Sportflix had both done it, but neither of them were very good. And Topps never put an image on the back of the card until 1992/1993. That was when they finally started to do it, unless you want to say 1991 with Stadium Club, which is really pushing it, but it kind of fits. That's the thing. It was just a cardboard card back. They never had any ability to do a meaningful image on the back, so they never bothered. But here in 1978, they went ahead and they put a portrait on the front, which is one of the few times that had been done. They'd done it in the 50s, but here in 1978, it's just about the only time we would ever see a portrait on the front along with an action shot. So it gave this card a very, very distinct quality in really the history of cards. Kind of cool idea. And once again, this 132 card set, it had for every single player who was an all-star. In this case, it's a little box that's stuffed down in the space right next to the circle of the portrait. And that was what they did for 1978. And so then in 1979, the template was in place, so there was no reason to change it. The card is designed with, again, there's an angled design down at the bottom, but in this case, it's actually designed in very significantly. They have a band for a team color that wraps around a 3D representation of a basketball, which is a very, very impressive, almost a high-end kind of a feature on the card. You can tell that they were really working to try to bring in card collectors into the basketball card market. This is a card where the design itself has a feature that is far beyond what you would see with Topps pretty much anywhere else. You wouldn't really see anything this significant until you would get to 1982 Topps football. So there was a lot of effort put into these cards, and they were about to make a major change. But at any rate, for the 1979 card, this is the way they designed it. And then for the All-Stars, the feature that they have flagging that is a circle with a basketball at the bottom, and the top is referring to the All-Star team that they were on. And that was 1979. So by the time they got to 1980, they knew they had to do something really impressive in order to get eyes onto basketball cards. They wanted to make this work. They were just having a really tough time. So for the 1980-81 basketball card set, Topps went and made one of the most unique cards ever. In fact, it's a card that we had basically never seen before and would hardly ever see again. We would see it reappear in 1996, but very briefly. And that is the 3-panel card. Now, it's not just 3 panels. This is a normal size card, but it has 3 small panels. It's broken into 3 panels with perforations. The idea was Topps wanted to make a 264 card set. So they made 264 mini cards that were attached on 3 panels. So this is a card set you can collect either as a 264 mini card set or as an 88 card complete set. You could also collect it as a 172 card set, but I'm not going to get into that at this point. So these cards, every single card comes with 3 distinct cards featured on it. And they're not lined up numerically, they're jumbled around, so they're all over the place. But the card set, because it's 264 cards, that means now you have the room for subsets. So there's a lot that's going on in this card set. And so every single player has obviously a main player card. It's a very, very small card, so on the front there's hardly room for anything. You have, again, an angled base, but it's just the text that is angled here on this card. And because of its small size, every card has a border which takes up a huge, huge amount of real estate. And because it's taking up that real estate, there's not much room for an image. So the images are really close and tight and personal, but they're also horrible production quality because Topps never made quality cards. They just didn't. Why bother? That's not that big of a deal until you get to a really small card, because if you go back and look at the 1976 jumbo cards, those massive cards, the printing quality on those is terrible. Well, now you shrink it down to this really small size. These cards are just horrendous, but it's mostly the photos that are horrendous. The actual detailing on the card for the border and for the text is actually pretty strong. But yeah, these images are lousy, so that's just kind of the nature of it. But like I said, they did have subsets. And so where you had a main player card, any player who was an all-star, they had a separate card for it. And it's a basketball at the top and a little banner to tell what team it's on. But the thing about these all-star cards is that on the back, it's a checklist, a card set checklist. So this is one of the early cases of a card company having a card front that is dedicated to a player, and then the card back is a checklist. I think it's the first time, but I haven't gone back and really looked into all the nooks and crannies. So I'm going to say it's definitely among the first ones, and we wouldn't really see this come into play until the mid-90s when it started to become a thing that card companies would do. So very, very unique. But at any rate, players who were all-stars, they had a separate all-star card that was an all-star card on the front. And then if they were a statistical leader on their team, then they had a separate card for that. This also has a basketball up at the top, which refers to the statistic that they're leading. And on the card back, this is like a little team history because it shows the top 10 statistical leaders of each of the team that this player is a statistical leader of. And then there was a fourth card that they did, a fourth theme, which was their slam dunk stars. This is a card where on the front it has a fully designed tilt down at the bottom with slam dunk text. It has a portrait of the player slamming the ball into the hoop. And on the back, they finally have the player name, and then they have the graphic that says slam dunk stars. So that's the way the set is laid out. It's a 264 card set with players that can have up to 4 different cards in this card set. So it's quite varied. But again, the cards all came on 3 card panels, and usually we leave them on those 3 cards. You can separate them out. It's preferred that you don't. Now, I mentioned 172, and the reason for that is because obviously there are 88 different cards that are on panels, or there are 88 cards of 3 card panels. And Topps actually did a whole nother layout of all of these cards in a different order. So that means that every single player, the card for that player shows up with 2 different alignments of 3 cards. It may be one player that's different, or 2 players that's different on any individual card. But this makes it tricky to collect the set if you're collecting the set with the cards complete, because you have to pay attention to which group an individual card is aligned with. Or if you want to collect both sets, 172 cards, buckle up. It's going to take a long time to do it, and you really got to be careful. But it's quite an achievement. But that's one of the quirks of this card set. And it's not the only quirk, because while that's all there is to say about the main card set, in packs they also had a mini team poster in every single pack. Every single team has one. This shows just how much Topps was really trying to work to reinvigorate, or not to reinvigorate, but to invent a basketball card market. Anything to get people's attention. Truly unusual cards that would be something people would talk about. Team posters in every single pack. Please, anything. And they were still struggling. So by the time they got to the 81-82 card set, they needed to really up their game. And for upping their game, instead of doing anything novel, they just stripped it down to what basketball cards do best. Action shots. Basketball is hands down the most photogenic sport, because just the nature of the athleticism of the game just speaks so well through all the action shots. So they designed a card focused on that. This is a card with almost no border around the outside. They really took up as much space as they could. A thin band with a team color, and then an explosion down at the bottom of team color for all of the text. These cards are among the few cards that really do scream out team, team, team. So if you're collecting teams, all these cards fit together in a wonderful way. This is almost as powerful as the 1990 Pro Set cards that launched a whole new opportunity for card companies to design cards themed around a team. This is a card set that shows up with a uniquely powerful team focus on it. So, very impressive. But like I said, this was all about the action shots, and Topps really worked to get good action shots in this card set. In fact, so much so that they also made super action cards, which had not been in basketball cards. They were basically a brand new addition for this sport. So they added action shots to a card set that was built for action shots. And ironically, the super action cards have on the back, they have a lot of really useful information, which is a pretty cool plus. But they added one other thing that was distinct about this card set, which is team cards. And the team cards on the front, they look like league leaders. 3 different statistical categories, so they have the team leader for each of the statistical categories. And then on the card back, they have a breakdown of all the statistics for all the players on the team. But you might notice that this Celtics card looks like a cruel joke. But it's not. All of the cards in this particular subset have purple and yellow. So it's like they designed the whole set with the Lakers in mind, but all the cards have this same color. So while the rest of the set is team color coded, this is just a single color for all these cards. And that was the 1981 set. So 81-82 was the last gasp for Topps, and it just didn't warrant another set. So they didn't bother to pursue making basketball cards afterwards until 1992-93. A long, long dry spell. And when they finally picked it up, the basketball card market had proven that it was worthwhile enough for Topps. Kind of a cocky attitude to have, but that's the way that it is. And unfortunately, one idea that Topps had was to make an archive set to show collectors what all of the card sets that they didn't bother to make from 1982 through 1991, what they could have looked like with basketball players for the rookie cards. Now, granted, they were just using the baseball designs, but still, it's kind of an absentee dad kind of a move that they made, because while it would have been nice for them to continue on with basketball, you also have to acknowledge they're not a charity, and basketball just wasn't ready for them. And even when Fleer jumped in 1986, they had a rough time seeing through the basketball card market finally rising up. By the time that you get to the 1990 first basketball Beckett, the 86-87 Michael Jordan rookie card was listed starting at just $200. That was in 1990. Now, within a couple of years, it would be through the roof. But that's the thing. By 1990, the basketball card market was finally starting to get some traction. It took a long time. So Topps certainly wasn't there for that stretch, but they had at least dedicated the 70s to trying to make it work. But other than that, that is the close of the early modern basketball card growth and evolution. If you haven't seen the videos that lead up to this, there are 3 other videos. There is the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and then the early to mid 70s, early 70s, and then the mid 70s, and then this is the late 70s. So if you haven't seen the others, definitely check it out, because it'll show you the whole progression that they went through. And I'm going to be moving on to the 90s Topps cards coming up with the next basketball videos that I'm going to be doing. So it's going to be cool to see how they were evolving the cards as they were feeling out the new basketball world. But that's going to be another video. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel, I urge you to do so. And yeah, definitely check out my other videos. And yeah, thank you very much for watching.